Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Eye on Icon. Today we bring you the news and all the latest that's happening in the Icon ecosystem. As you know, this podcast is powered by Icon Plus, and with me today is our co-host, always, Iconographer. How are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Yeah, great. Shall we have the usual tango about the price?
Yeah, we're just hanging out at 190 or so. We, sometimes we'll dip below it, sometimes we'll dip above it, but it seems like there's a magnet of sorts around 190. So again, way better than we were, around this time last year. But it does seem that there's a lot of potential if we can ever break through that $2 mark. I think we'll potentially see some fireworks. But we haven't really gotten to that point yet. But I think everyone's probably getting a little bit tired of it. But I think if you zoom out in the grand scheme of things, we're all doing pretty well. So can't complain too much.
Yes, definitely. Look, I made mention that the $2 mark is our kryptonite, and on the tweet I said, but Superman always beats kryptonite, and Tony made mention that we're kind of like the whole 40 cents range again, where we just kept going in that range, and then when we broke free, we really broke free. So just a little more patience, a lot in the works, and you'll see from today everything we report. So look, let's dive in. There's a bit to cover. First off, the ranks. This actually just got released moments ago. There was a new promo video for website Icon Vote. Now, this, for me, it slipped under the radar that it existed, so I wanted to shed some light on it. It's essentially a site where P-reps can go and put in proposals to get feedback from iconists that have voted for them in the direction they should go on certain issues, whether it be sponsoring dApps through CPS, whatever it may be. But the site is designed to interact with the voters, so I found this quite great, and I didn't realize it existed. So the fact that it does, and it's quite well visually presented and easy to use. So I encourage P-reps, if you want a bit of input from your voters, or get your voters engaged, get on there and start putting up some proposals. And remember, these aren't proposals that get funding or anything. It's just proposals for ideas of what you want to get, opinions or views from your voters, what they want to see from you. It can be anything really. And from a voting perspective, any iconist who has ICX in their wallet can actually log in, and it doesn't cost you anything, but it sees that, and then you can vote only on the P-reps that you voted on. It automatically detects that, and you can pick, have your say, give your P-rep a bit of direction, your thought process, or what you'd like to see them do. I thought this was great and wanted to call that out.
Yeah, pulling a bit of my poli-sci minor out of my back pocket here. But Icon functions as a republic. Technically, people elect people, and those people who get elected make decisions on their behalf. This is kind of a quasi form of more direct democracy, where those P-reps who want to take this approach and want to get a better sense of where exactly their voters stand on certain issues can say, hey, this vote on this proposal is coming up. What do you think we should do as a P-rep? Or hey, what project should we work on next as a P-rep, or whatever it might be. So a lot of creativity there. Nice little tool for both P-reps and voters to have. So I certainly would encourage both categories of people to take a look at that website and start using it. The other, another bit of news. This one is not as positive as we usually like to be, but felt it worth mentioning. Balanced, which is probably the most anticipated dApp, along with OMM on Icon at this given point in time. It will be delayed, unfortunately. They said likely in April. They would give a 2 weeks 2 weeks notice on when the platform would launch, so people have adequate time to unstake however much ICX they plan to utilize in the platform. We've obviously talked plenty about Balanced in the past. We had Scott Smiley on. I've written a good amount about it, and so if you're at the point where you don't know about it yet, that's kind of a surprise. But we'll certainly put some resources in the show notes for you to better learn about it. But look, this is the first DeFi product. If you can count Unifi or uTrade, which runs on Unifi, as well as IconPool. Those are theoretically the first DeFi products, but I think the first major release that there's a lot of anticipation behind. and one where there's a possibility that a lot more potentially could go wrong from from a vulnerability standpoint if it's not built right. So the fact they're delaying is obviously a bummer, but at the same time, 100 times out of 100, I'd rather them say, "Hey, we're delaying it to make sure it's as secure and safe as possible to use." I think the cost of waiting another month is worth it to know that there's a much safer product to use, and from a branding standpoint, I'm gonna say the worst thing that could happen, but certainly very negative thing that could happen is we have this DeFi platform launch, gets a lot of participation, a lot of use, and then all of a sudden there's a vulnerability and either funds are liquidated or stolen or manipulated or whatever else it might be. So that certainly wouldn't be a good way to kick off Icon's DeFi rollout. So the fact they're delaying, again, it's a bummer, but it's really, really, really important to get it right. And I know the team really understands that, and they've been working very hard to do that. And I think, I'm confident that they wouldn't release something unless they felt that it was as secure as they could possibly make it.
Couldn't agree more. Look, one of the good positive things that I noticed was the sentiment was positive, even though the delay was announced quite early. They set a launch date of end of March, middle of March. Obviously, they realized through audits there's just things that they want to just fix and get right. They let us know straight away. Reception's been quite positive. I know, disappointed, but what we have to realize here is, this particular DeFi project creates new utility for the Icon ICX token. Now all of a sudden we can actually lock our asset and get staking rewards and borrow on it at the same time. And this is the first of this kind of protocol to launch on Icon. Yes, stuff like this exists on other chains, but this is the first one on Icon. So we need to ensure, well, when I say we're just, reporting on the news, but the team needs to ensure that are working on it, that they get it right. So take the time they need. It's great that they were able to make that decision. And another thought process I had when I heard about this news, let's take Ethereum. At the moment, we know it's got a booming DeFi sector. In fact, it's so booming every day. There's new protocols that launch that you haven't even heard of, doing some kind of variation in the DeFi space. And at the same time, there's just as many hacks that happen through smart contracts because they haven't been audited, and users lose their fun. Now, at the start there was a lot of noise about this, but recently I've noticed when there's been hacks even of 2, 3, 4 million, 20 million, you actually don't hear about it as much. But I assure you the users who are being impacted, they've probably lost their life savings or huge impact. So this is the nature of the balanced protocol. It enables someone to take all their assets, lock it up and borrow on it. So the team need to make sure we need to get this right, and I think that was the key takeaway I wanted to call out for this perspective. So kudos on the team making that call. I can't wait for it to launch in April sometime, and now instead of the 7-day countdown for the unstaking, it looks like we're going to have 14 days, so we can really time it just right depending on how much collateral you want to use on the protocol.
The other next bit of news is IconFi has announced they will support late ERC20 token swappers starting in around April or May. So I think, as everyone who's listening to this probably knows, back in 2018, as mainnet launched, Icon had originally ICX was a ERC20 token based on the Ethereum network. They swapped it to the native mainnet ICX that we all love and use today. But a lot of people, obviously, at that point in time had kind of zoned out of crypto a little bit, or stopped paying attention to the project, or didn't necessarily hear the news. So as enthusiasm for crypto has returned, as well as ICX, as the price has gone up, a lot of folks have come back and realized that they still have those old tokens and have needed help. I can say, as one of the Reddit community managers who kind of has to deal with a lot of these different things, that the rest of the moderators and community managers on Reddit have been doing a lot of difficult work in terms of assisting the many people who have had questions or concerns or issues with the token swap, which, as it exists now, is a bit of a clunky process. And it's from Icon's standpoint, the foundation standpoint, to perform those Ethereum transactions, it costs a little bit of extra, but I guess a lot of extra money in terms of gas fees and things like that. So through IconFi, they've been able to set up a much more, what I assume will be a much more fluid and easy to understand process. So folks who still haven't swapped yet, we'll be able to do that in a fairly straightforward and easy way. As I mentioned, it launches, they said, sometime in either April or May, and should have more details then exactly about how it'll work. But I think that'll make it a lot easier for people to swap, a lot less frustration, and a lot less work for people who are either Reddit community managers or active in the Telegram or part of the foundation itself, who have been doing a lot of support on that swap process.
Look, agree, and IconFi is all about simplicity, right? The goal of it, and it is to remove that complexity around staking, voting, etc. And it's great to see this that I see happen. I see a tweet about someone comment on tweets about it every day, and in the Reddit forums I see a post, someone asking how to swap pretty much every day. So something that there clearly is a lot of demand for, that it's going to be simplified, and in this app is just brilliant to see support being added. So I believe it's early April. They said they'll have it released with guides on how it will all work through the app, which can't wait for. Excellent. The next one, this is just ongoing. So we know Binance have run a node, and they had a huge staking of 30 million. Then I think a few days back they threw another 20 million onto the staking and onto their node, and so they're now the number one PREP, superseding the foundation. And I thought let's spend a moment here, because everyone there's a lot of views on this. It can be viewed positively and negatively, but for the moment, let's talk through. Iconographer, what are your thoughts on Binance becoming the number one PREP?
Well, it's certainly a nuanced issue. I guess on the plus side, you have what is I believe they're a multi-billion-dollar company at this point in time, with a lot of vested interest in the long-term success of crypto, now becoming, essentially one of the larger stakeholders as far as Icon's concerned. So a lot of those, the tokens for the most part are custody for users' tokens, but I imagine a chunk of them are, potentially Binance's as well. I don't know exactly how these exchanges work in terms of how they manage, balances and how much of it's users and everything like that. But that being said, they do have a pretty good amount of control over the network. So yeah, I think they have a vested interest in making sure that the ICX token remains strong. If people are buying it and trading it and selling it, that's obviously good for Binance. If the token ends up dying or the project ends up dying, that's certainly not good for Binance. So having them as a stakeholder is certainly a positive in that light. Also, as far as their staking and other services that they offer, there's a nice little bump in PR as far as exposure for the project is concerned. So that's certainly a plus as well. On the negative side, they now have, even though those tokens aren't necessarily quote unquote theirs, they are holding them on behalf of their users. They do have a pretty significant voice in the future direction of Icon governance, and that includes potentially whether or not CPS projects get approved or not. I'm not entirely clear if they're going to participate in that or not, or if they're just going to take a hands-off approach. I think that would certainly be fair. I know the Icon Foundation is doing that as well, for the sake of decentralization. So you also have to worry about other potential proposals that come down the line. Say there's a proposal to increase transaction fees for ICX, which has been discussed about because they are pretty low, and that would be helpful in terms of balancing off against inflation and obviously generating more demand for the token if more of them are burned for each transaction. Theoretically, if I'm Binance, I could say, wait a second, so I got to pay more every time someone transacts ICX, either withdrawing or depositing. From a business standpoint, from a bottom line standpoint, that wouldn't be necessarily in Binance's interest, even if it would be in Icon's interest. So there are situations like that where down the road we might have an interesting kind of conflict situation with Binance. But that being said, I think they're more edge cases. I think Binance has as I said, a long-term vested interest in making sure the project's successful. So I don't lose too much sleep over it. But that being said, I do have a little bit of concern about how they might take certain approaches when when something might be in the community interest, it might not necessarily be in Binance's interest. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yep. Look, agree that's good overview of all the potential scenarios. Yes, Binance, number one exchange, the fact that they're throwing so much weight is just positive, and it's great to see. Even if new eyeballs coming into crypto see that, they're like, oh great, Binance is supporting this project. I think through a few conversations, one thing I also realized, there's the whole staking factor. Obviously, with such a large chunk, that overall staked supply has gone up, which is a good thing. I completely overlooked that fact. One thing else I realized is, you have to ask, well, why is Binance throwing so much weight over here? What do we know? We know Icon's got a lot of stuff building, but other blockchains have certain aspects of DeFi built as well. But what Icon has that's unique is it's an excellent relationship with IconLOOP, and that has an excellent relationship with the South Korean government, and there's various projects. So when you start tracing it, you can see, well, it's in their best interest to also support a project that has so many strings attached in the right places, I guess. So that was my little takeaway from a few conversations, and Tony really, again, I've given him a couple of call outs this episode, but he really helped with that perspective. However, on the flip side, everything you just said, I think very short term, my big concern was, while Icon 2.0 hasn't launched, the CPS funds that get topped up is going to happen from the block rewards the foundation get. So the fact that they've been superseded, I want funding for stuff to get built. Now, it'll probably barely impact the funding that goes into CPS, but that was just me being a little, controlling. And overall, the last point you called out, at what point, if they decide to start voting, and how will that play out? Those were my concerns as well. But you know what? The size of Binance now and how much they have their fingers in, I'd really start to question, well, how much they're going to deep dive into every chain, because they're staking for so many chains now. I question if they're about getting involved in governance decisions, or just being that one-stop shop for the everyday person to be able to use the staking services across different chains. So there's a lot to consider there, and everyone will have a different view. Overall, great to see more support behind Icon, and let's stay positive on that nature. So
certainly.
Yeah. So okay, another bit of news that just came out as well, and I won't spend too much time here. However, Katina released their first newsletter. I believe Peter and Corey, have been spreading the news. I did read through it, so it gives some great insights, because we know they've created the forum. The goal of their essential space is to their PREP to create something away from the Icon Foundation or that Icon structure as a separate entity, but kind of, creates that space for all different kind of projects to come across and have a central point of news about Icon, but discuss topics that can, interoperate, connect between all chains. That's the goal, right? To bring interoperability across the space. So part of what they're doing first is I've highlighted this, they've got these forums for everyone to chat. Corey's gone and created a lot of videos and content around all the different PREPs. Now they've nicknamed this the Katina OS, but at its core it is kind of a ranking and rating system for all the PREPs on the Icon ecosystem. Because remember, their goal is to attract retail investors and institutional investors. So they want to create a platform where institutional investors can come and see what PREPs are building and teams are doing if they wanted to invest their money strategically, etc. This is the takeaway I've gotten from the newsletter that has just been published. There's a lot more there, but we'll have this in the show notes, and I encourage, if you want to know what Peter's up to, because he does have a lot of influence in this space, and especially what he's up to specifically supporting the Icon ecosystem, dive into that newsletter and into the forums over there. IconGrapher, anything from your end?
Yeah, just the one thing I noticed is there's an effort to kind of really quantify as best as possible what PREPs are doing and various activities, things like that. There's obviously no perfect way to do that. One person's model will vary differently from a different person's model as far as the data being used, but it looks like they're putting a lot of thought and effort into it. So I certainly I think that'll be a helpful resource. I've seen a number of people over time who kind of say, hey, how do I know what PREPs are doing what? So if there's a way to kind of really I don't say simplify it, but at least create a kind of an immediate understanding of which ones are active and which ones aren't, and which ones are active in what categories. Something like that. I think that'll certainly be helpful.
Yep.
Another piece of positive news, Zen Sports, which is, it's not talked about a whole lot, but I would say in terms of, mainstream adoption, it's probably pretty high up there, if not number one, as far as Icon affiliated projects that are out there in terms of the amount of overall mass adoption, or at least mass interest that they've gotten thus far. They closed yet another series of funding. I guess another round of funding within their Series A. So I don't know the exact figure by now, but this most recent round was $2.4 million investment, which is obviously not a small amount of money from various venture capital firms and venture capital interests. I think this is another. By now they've raised several millions. I'm not sure if they're above in the tens and 20s yet. I can't remember off the top of my head, but nonetheless, it's a product that's gaining a lot of steam. They're getting licensed. It's a peer-to-peer sports betting application. You are able to bet with ICX on it, and they're getting licenses in various states. Obviously, it's kind of a patchwork situation out in the United States where some states have allowed sports betting, others haven't. But you need a license if you do want to operate there. They're working hard on that. So they are really, really, it's a pretty credible project. I know their team works incredibly hard. And they do have, they have something called a sports token. I think they have sport and sports. They both operate as kind of within their own ecosystem, and primarily serve as a kind of a internal reward token, I guess you could say, in a way to, you can earn lower fees and things like that within the Zen Sports app. But as I said, they run on Icon as IRC2 tokens. So, it's not necessarily quote unquote running on the Icon blockchain, but they do have a good amount of exposure to Icon. And so, as things progress more and they get more and more successful and they get more and more investment, and they, if they eventually blow up, that'll be a lot of exposure, at least in America, to ICX and Icon. So certainly a positive thing. And again, not super noticed, but they've been around for a while now and just keep pushing along.
Yep, agree. If they're getting funding, they're doing something right. I'm all for it. Next one we have iETH got listed on Unifi. So for listeners that aren't aware, so Orbit Bridge, a while back the Icon Foundation announced a partnership with Orbit Bridge. That protocol, what it does is it helps migrate assets onto various chains. Icon now is one of them. I've created a tutorial where you as a user can actually migrate, say, your ETH across to Icon, and it would transfer as iETH, and then you could, essentially, once an AMM lists it, at the time of the video this wasn't the case, but today Unifi in the last 2 days has listed iETH, so now you can essentially trade your ICX into ETH or vice versa on the Icon blockchain. So you don't have to worry about any of those insane fees, and it gives you a great exposure to, ETH essentially. So we hope to see a lot more of this happen, as that bridge has been open for a while, and you can already see on the tracker there's a lot of the various tokens, IDAI, and so many others. I think there's 10 current tokens that are supported, and hopefully we see a lot more migrate across to Icon. But what it means for you as a user, so at the moment when you go to the Unifi protocol, if you want, you can trade from ICX to ETH, but because there isn't a lot of liquidity, you'll notice there's a fair bit of slippage, because if you're trying to acquire a bit of ETH, that price will slip quite heavily. So there's something to be wary of. So the opportunities it presents is, one, you could buy, or two, you can actually use the Orbit Bridge yourself, and say you had a stash of 30 ETH, you could bring it across and supply it as liquidity and start earning that up token, because you would be, you'd have a substantial share in that liquidity pool. Now, if what I have said has sounded confusing, I have created tutorials. IconGraph has written plenty of articles. We'll put a couple of them in the show notes, so feel free to refer to them, or even reach out with some comments, and we're happy to share, help anyone out. In fact, IconGrapher, you've got a Icon DeFi Telegram group where everyone can join and kind of ask questions like this, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. So it's been, it's few members join every once in a while. I think we're well over 100 by now. Occasionally there'll be questions and a little bit of discussion. I imagine it'll be, as soon as these protocols start launching, it'll start getting a lot more active. But it's just a place, a resource that people can go if they've read about DeFi, but maybe have a couple more questions or whatever else it might be. It's an opportunity for them to pop in and have a chat with us. And so, I think, the Orbit Bridge is, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing. It's pretty cool to see Ethereum on Icon. One of the things you could do theoretically is, it would be doing a service for the network as well. Is, if there's a price discrepancy between what the actual price of Ethereum is and what it's trading on uTrade, there's an opportunity to arbitrage trade it to where, say you have some Ethereum, it's trading at a high rate on the Icon version. You could move it over, sell it, and then buy it with ICX and then move it back. So obviously it'd be a bit multi-step process, and you'd pay a little bit in fees, but if you have enough, it would be worthwhile. So just another kind of a handy trick beyond just if you want to provide liquidity, obviously that choice is there as well.
Definitely. Look, make sure you cross the gas fees. Like, there's a fee when you move back and forth from Icon to Ethereum, where you pay 25 ICX fee. I don't know if that's been adjusted recently, but it was that. To move ETH across to Icon, there is no fee. There is just the gas fees you would pay. Given the complexity of the transaction, those gas fees can be higher than normal. Say you were just using Uniswap to swap a token. So it's just the way ETH is at the moment. So make sure you're doing your research there and feeling confident. Okay, so one quick note. Now, I know a lot of our listeners are also P-reps and who are working on various projects on the Icon ecosystem. I didn't note down the user's name, but someone made a comment on a tweet that he was browsing through CoinMarketCap on Icon and noticed a lot of the protocols that are still being built, they're not noted down. There is an option on the site where you can actually, the blockchains can go in there and post all the various protocols that are being built on their blockchain. So a lot of this information wasn't there for the Icon listing, and he actually mentioned that it'd be great to see some of these projects so that when eyeballs are hitting and just checking out Icon on that site, they can see a list of everything being built out on Icon at the moment. So if you're listening and you actually are working on a project and didn't know this, please jump on the site and get it noted there so that people can see what's being built.
Yeah, it's not the equivalent of running it out on the Super Bowl or anything like that. But that being said, I think a decent chunk of people are probably checking out CoinMarketCap, and more specifically, checking up an Icon every once in a while. So if there's a chance that they do a little more further reading and can see those projects that are coming down the line, it'll maybe potentially get more casual browsers more interested in the Icon project, as well as get some more exposure for those individual projects as well. So I imagine it doesn't take a whole lot of time, and so it's probably worth the while to do it.
Excellent. So IconGraph, I'll see equality on there soon, won't I?
I imagine so, yes. Earlier this week, we released an episode where we interviewed the Project Nebula team. Of course, that is the game, space exploration strategy game that is operating on Icon to the extent that it has a number of NFTs available. I definitely encourage you to listen to that episode if you've not already. We definitely got some good insight into the project, as well as some cool content that hadn't been released yet. So certainly be sure to listen to that. They also, I believe they alluded to some news that was coming, and the news is that they are doing a spaceship airdrop. So they've decided over the last few weeks or months to make spaceships as NFTs as well. Obviously, they had the Planet pre-sale back in late 2020, if I recall correctly. It was open for a while, so if you were paying attention to Icon at the time, it would have been hard to miss that they were doing this, since a lot of people were talking about it. The pre-sale was tremendously popular. They had to actually change the rules to make it more fair for people to get planets. So it was pretty, I think, relatively easy to get one, and they weren't super expensive at the time. I think they were selling for I can't remember which version of them, but I think rare planets were like 150 ICX back when it was trading at 50 to 75 cents or something like that. They're now trading for a whole lot more. I think part of that's brought on by the NFT craze. But that all being said, in order to disseminate spaceships in kind of a limited manner, they are airdropping them into any wallets that have Generation Zero, which is the pre-sale Generation Zero planets. They've come up with a little bit of a scoring system in order to determine what quantity and quality of spaceships that you'll receive. I encourage you to read the Medium article if you want more details on it, just because it is a little bit complicated, but not nothing too crazy, but just a little bit harder to describe on this podcast. But that being said, those who have shown a little bit more interest and faith in the project from the get-go and have acquired a planet as an NFT, they'll also be rewarded with a spaceship. Fortunately, this is not the only way that you'll be able to acquire spaceships. They've also indicated they'll be doing additional either giveaways or other opportunities to earn them without necessarily receiving them in the airdrop. And I also imagine at some point in time they'll be available on the marketplace as well, which is where you can also buy planets. So certainly a nice way to get another kind of cool element of the game out there. And obviously kind of further latch on to the NFT craze that's going on right now, and reward those who have shown interest in the project for a long time now.
Look, it's great. We asked a couple of questions. They weren't ready to announce it on the show just a few days ago, so it was great to see how quickly this news dropped. If you're sitting there going, I came into this quite late, I didn't know, never fear. The snapshot actually happens on the 5th of April, and the only planets for sale in the marketplace at the moment is the Generation Zero planets. So if you look and people are still selling them, you want to buy it. Now you may be looking at it, some of these prices have gone from 25 ICX. I think the uncommon planets are now 300, 200 ICX. But let's put this into perspective. These are NFTs. We know at the moment NFTs is the buzzword, is the craze. It is a utility that can revolutionize so many industries. So it's just reflective of what's going on, and a lot of that is going on Ethereum and side chains. But here's a project that is being built on Icon, and the NFT gaming space, and the price of what is happening is reflective of the industry as a whole. So this, I hope you see what I'm hinting at over here. This is the NFT space, and we're already seeing that trickle through to our blockchain. Now imagine with DeFi and stuff right there on the horizon, we can expect that. I hope to expect that kind of exposure and action. But yeah, great. I can't even the point system. I see what you're saying, Iconographer, but when you read the article, it'll make perfect sense. They've got beautiful pictures that illustrate how simple it is and what you would get rewarded. So if you were part of Gen Zero, well, good time to be holding. If you're not, check out the marketplace and buy some planets after reading the guide, so you know what you're buying and what you'll get rewarded as part of the drop. Next bit of news now, I just noticed this the other day, Citadel One, I've covered them very briefly. They've just dropped a new guide overview, because essentially they have a platform where you can put your address various chains, Icon being one of them, Tezos, and all kinds of different staking chains. You can track your addresses, and it shows you all the rewards you're getting from the various chains. It aggregates it into a beautiful dashboard, essentially multi-chain support and a viewer of your staking rewards and transaction history for whatever chains it supports. So they've dropped a beautiful guide, and it is a dApp that is worthy of checking out. One day I'm going to get to it and cover it off as a tutorial, but at the moment I saw that guide, it was quite good. I wanted to get it out there as well.
So I guess I'd say one of the more major pieces of news we've gotten this week was some news out of South Korea. It was originally, I guess, most prominently explained by Marcus, who often is kind of one of the first on the scene to explain these things. Basically, he did a tweet thread, because kind of laying it out. I'm going to read basically the first three of them, which kind of explain what this news was. So he says, the Seoul government, whose blockchain operator is IconLOOP, has announced mass implementation of contactless online reservations for more than 7,000 public services. This uses Loop Chain, the core blockchain engine of the Hello Icon network. These public services include sports facilities, cultural and educational programs, medical treatment at city hospitals, and much more, all operated by the Seoul metropolitan government. Previously, reservations required in-person document submissions, but using IconLoop's loop chain, they can now be done online, allowing a total of 9 types of documents to be digitally submitted, including ID and digital signatures. So, whenever something like this pops up, whenever it's IconLoop doing something, the first kind of thing that pops into, I think, everyone's brain, myself included, is, okay, so is this using the ICX token or not? Obviously, as ICX holders, we have a interest in that token be actually being utilized and adopted, and because if it's required for these mass level of services, that requires the entity operating it to presumably purchase a chunk of it, and also if with each transaction that happens, ICX is burned, which obviously helps as far as inflation and offsetting that moving forward. So I think that's all fairly obvious and something people all understand. So as far as this one is concerned, we haven't gotten clarity yet as far as if ICX would be used and to what extent it might be used. Usually in the past, when this type of news has come out, we kind of learned fairly quickly afterward that ICX would indeed get used. So all we know, but for sure, is that IconLoop is involved. And so I guess there's still it's been an interesting relationship basically ever since the inception of the project, and it's still there's still a chunk of the community that is kind of confused about what exactly it means, or why IconLoop gets credited sometimes and Icon doesn't, and what exactly the difference is. And so for the sake of clarity, they're two separate entities. You have the Icon Foundation, which is a nonprofit technically based in Switzerland, whose mission it is to essentially build out, cultivate, do business development for the Icon public blockchain network. That's what we're most familiar with. That's what the ICX token is for. That's when people say Icon, that's basically what they mean. At the same time, you have IconLoop, which is a more traditional company. It's based in South Korea. It's kind of I don't say a spinoff, but it was developed by a number of financial technology firms, conglomerates operating in Korea that wanted to delve into the blockchain space. They had various clients who had expressed interest in utilizing a blockchain and being able to utilize a blockchain that connected other chains, and so they decided to form IconLoop. It was originally called The Loop. They changed it to IconLoop in order to further cement that relationship between the two entities. And it's a private company. They've gotten a good amount of traditional investment as a kind of traditional technology company. And what they do is they build out blockchain technology. They are the ones who built, as Marcus alluded to, the Loop Chain engine. Loop Chain is also what powers the Icon public chain. So to a certain extent, Icon is a client of IconLoop, where I assume theoretically that the foundation has paid IconLoop to, or at least compensated in some way, shape, or form to build out the actual technology that runs the Icon network. I assume they're assisting in terms of the development of Icon 2.0. The foundation, my understanding is, does have its own resources and staff available for technical operations, but at the same time relies a lot on IconLoop because they, again, did build out that underlying blockchain technology. There's been a lot of overlap in the past. The CEO of IconLoop has sat on the board of the foundation. So they've kind of held hands throughout this whole process. And so, whenever IconLoop gets a new client or a new partner, even if it doesn't immediately say, oh, and they're going to use ICX, it's still good news in the sense that the more and more people that are using loop chain based technology, which is what IconLoop is providing, the more that are potentially going to eventually want to utilize the Icon public chain or a public chain in general. And if they're going to use a public chain in general, they almost certainly would want to use the one that is operating on the same underlying technology that their own individual private chain is operating on. And so, there's a lot of cases around where you might have, and I think this is kind of why, this is why everyone bought Icon back in the day to begin with, was, you're going to have multi individual chains, and at some point in time, they're going to be able to need to talk to each other for whatever reasons. There was the example that Marcus had laid out a long time ago in one of his longer articles diving into Icon, where basically, say a student shows up and has, health issues, goes to the hospital, the medical records are able to be automatically through a smart chain interact with the insurance company to, resolve whatever paperwork might be necessary there. At the same time, she's able to use her digital decentralized ID to interact with her school, things like that. And so you have all these different entities that theoretically could be using blockchain in the future, and having the ability to be able to interact with each other in a seamless manner via smart contract. That's really what the value of the Icon public chain provides. So, theoretically, if they have thousands of different public services that'll be operating on this, I don't know if there are each individual chain or one kind of bigger chain that the city will use as a whole. I assume probably the latter. At a certain point, they're potentially going to want to utilize other either Icon, other blockchains that are built by IconLoop, or potentially even the Icon Foundation itself. So just because it doesn't immediately say, this uses ICX, it'll use a lot of ICX and everything like that. I think the fact that there's momentum in the fact that there's more and more faith being put into the IconLoop, both company, but also more importantly, the underlying technology, which also operates, again, that underlying technology is what powers Icon. So if you have these clients, in this case, the government of Seoul, that you build up participation, or I guess usage of the private IconLoop blockchain, I think it's going to create, and it's successful, there's a lot more willingness potentially to utilize the Icon public chain for whatever other potential interlocking communications or usages or whatever else you might want to describe it as. So, again, some of us would like to be hit over the head with it and say, yes, it's using ICX. At the same time, the reason crypto is what it is because it's such a cutting edge and new and innovative field, and it's not like over mainstream adoption happens overnight. It's all gradual. There's a lot of these entities out there that they got excited by the prospect of it, but when they saw how it actually worked, or they saw what it took, or they saw how much they'd really need to realign their systems, they kind of shrugged and said, maybe it's not necessary for us. I think that's kind of what happened in 2017. A lot of these companies said, oh yeah, blockchain. There was, IBM was running blockchain commercials all the time. Whatever, it's kind of all over the place to a certain extent. But I think once the rubber hit the road, a lot of these entities realized that they didn't necessarily need blockchain in the same way that they thought they might, or it wasn't quite as, it was more of a trend at the time than necessarily a lot of people thought it was. But it is still, so it's a cutting edge thing, and it's really encouraging to see the government of Seoul, after blockchain's been around for this long, start to pick up on it and say, yeah, we're committed to utilizing this. We're making a public announcement about it. They've had a relationship with IconLoop for several years now. I mean, it's existed, I think, basically since the inception of the ICO, or maybe around 2018, something like that. So because it's cutting edge, because it's innovative, there's a lot of uncertainty still. And so the reason there's a lot of risk, but also a lot of reward, is because we don't quite know what the future looks like. And so, if everyone knew right now that, oh, yep, ICX is definitely going to be used, we know for a fact that's going to be used by governments. We know for a fact that's going to be used by companies. Everyone would have bought in already a long time ago. The price would already be high, and the opportunity for future growth would be low. And so, with certainty, you reduce your upside as far as the potential gains you have to make. But because we're still in such a speculative circumstance, there's a lot more chance for reward. Now, there's a lot of chance it can go south. All of a sudden, say, Seoul uses blockchain, they go, actually, it's not quite what we thought it was going to be. Never mind. Obviously, that's still a possibility on the table. Every day, that looks less and less likely, but it's still a possibility. So, I think as part of crypto, people have to get used to the fact that not each and every time you're going to hear a definitive answer about whether or not this certain piece of news is going to definitely help the price of your token or not. I think you need to look at the broader trend and say, okay, is overall adoption increasing, and is adoption in our general direction increasing, and are the dominoes lining up in a way that would lead to eventual mass adoption of ICX? I think if the path is eventually all these major enterprises and institutions and governments utilizing Icon-related public chain or Icon-related services, the way to get there is basically the way we're looking at it now. So because they're not saying overnight, okay, yep, everything's using Icon, I think obviously we would like to hear that, but at the same time, just being the nature of crypto, there's going to be a little bit of uncertainty. But again, as everything's moving in the right direction, that's why people are optimistic. I think that's why a lot of the community were really excited about this news, even though it didn't specifically say, yeah, definitely using ICX. It still means everything's moving in the right direction, and to a certain extent, still going according to plan. So that's why I'm optimistic. And hey, for all we know, maybe tomorrow we get more clarity. They say, oh, actually, yeah, it is using ICX. But just because that doesn't happen doesn't necessarily mean it's disappointing news or anything else like that.
Look, great overview and summary. I guess my only 2 cents of the matter is, yeah, I am one of those. Oh, what does it do for the public network? But I think everything you've said is true. You need to think big picture. Generally, governments, they're just not going to go into a public chain without trialing, testing in a more controlled environment, right? Because they're quite slow to adopt or change, but if they do it and do it wrong, they could cop a lot of flack for it, for an Aussie word.
I think also it's important to note too that even though Icon's been wrong as long as it has been, it still isn't. Every tech adoption requires scaling, and to think that we could automatically overnight utilize Icon across an entire city with millions of transactions a day. I don't know if the network's potentially stable enough at this point in time from an infrastructure standpoint to handle that immediately. Now, it'll get there eventually, and I think Icon 2.0 is probably part of that. And my Rhizome teammate Brian can certainly speak on this better than I can. He's more of an infrastructure guy. But that's the other part of it too. Is just even though people think these things, after 3 years everything should be rocking and rolling, it's still a process and scaling. I think anyone who follows technology or is involved in technology knows that scaling and being prepared for true mass adoption, that too doesn't happen overnight. And so being able to kind of more gradually wade into the waters is the better approach and potentially the only approach from a tech standpoint.
Yeah, and this makes mention of, what was it, 9 different documents, 9 different.
Something like that, yeah.
So and start thinking, okay, well, what have we got on the public chain? We know we've got Proof. We know an aspect of MyID interacts with the public chain. They'll probably look, we hope, to utilize some of the existing infrastructure that is there, because that's why it's out and it exists. So, look, let them keep adopting. I even remember the original vision. I remember in 2017, that idea of the example you gave. You got the hospital, you got the various financial sector and all that. They all potentially say are running their own loop chain, private chains. However, at some point, they, instead of replicating all the information, they'd want to transfer the information, and you can kind of see bits and pieces still playing out to that nature, where all these things are happening in the background, and Icon is sitting there, with BTP about to launch an Icon 2.0, and hope the goal there, hopefully we see that connection happening through the public chain. Now, again, speculation, just taking a lot of the pieces off what's been published. Even recently, Marcus put out a bit more for breakdown in his Telegram chat, which I've referenced to a little bit as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But every time we get news like this, it is great, because it shows that in the background this is still happening and it is still expanding. It wasn't just all myth and fluff in the early days. This has been an ongoing build out from the government side of things, and it continues to happen. So to me it was great insights and just awesome news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. I think, look, that's what we have in the news today. As just what I mentioned before, again, everything we've talked about is not financial advice in any way, shape, or form. We're just breaking down the news based on our views and experience and what we see happening in the Icon ecosystem and broader out there in the blockchain universe, so crypto universe, I should say. So once again, thanks for listening. Iconographer, any closing words?
Nope. I think it was just another relatively busy week. Again, not everything was 100% positive, but that being said, we keep trucking along and everything's still moving in the right direction.
Exactly. And remember, everyone, if you like what you're listening to, please give us, if you're on Apple Podcasts, those 5 stars, subscribe on YouTube, on any of your platforms. If you can rate us, please do. And keep in mind, you're probably noticing a lot more content coming out, because we are trying to get out 3 episodes through the week. We'll aim for the news at the end of the week to give you a full summary of what's gone down. We are talking to various teams as part of the CPS proposals to bring you some insights on what the Icon funds are being used for, and the CPS funds being used for to get built out on the Icon ecosystem. And at the same time, we're trying to also catch up with teams that are currently building, and not necessarily teams, it can be Scott, or hopefully Rick, Min one day, and various teams that have got either something coming up within this year or in flight, hopefully to have about the Bounty Cat guys on, things like that we can give you insights into some of the stuff that's being built. So we hope to keep coming to you with 3 consistent episodes, and they'll be shorter than the 1 episode a week that we have been publishing. So please do listen to each episode. They all it is all quite unique in content, and we'll give you a lot of insights. Once again, thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.